My sister threw an $85,000 engagement party on my vineyard, opened my vintage cellar, then called me just the gardener. I waited until she drank $5,000 wine, then walked in. I was kneeling in the cold mud, fighting to save my vines from an early frost, when a $300 champagne cork hit me squarely in the shoulder. The sting was immediate, an unexpected jolt through my heavy, water-proof coveralls. I looked up, dragging my hands, which were coated in cold, clinging vineyard mud, from the soil, to see my sister, Bella, standing on my stone terrace. She was wearing a blinding white designer gown, laughing with a tall, handsome man and an older couple who radiated wealth like heat from asphalt. The party was in full swing. Bella pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me, down in the muck of the North Vineyard. I couldn't hear the exact words over the string quartet, but the tone of her voice and the dismissive gesture were clear enough. Then, a few seconds later, when a wave of laughter reached me, I caught the end of her sentence, carried on the breeze. "Don't worry about the gardener. She's just a hired hand we keep around out of pity." She didn't realize that the hired hand she had just insulted owned the deed to the entire estate, the mansion, the terrace, and every one of the 12,000 vines she was now looking down upon. She also didn't know I was supposed to be in Paris right now, meeting with distributors in Bordeaux, but I had flown home early. She thought she had pulled off the perfect crime. A weekend of borrowed luxury, to impress her fiancé's billionaire family, the Sterlings. The woman in the elegant pearls, the one who looked at me with distaste. I was Margaret Sterling, the family matriarch. I was about to turn Bella's dream engagement party into a crime scene investigation. To understand why, I was kneeling in the mud in the middle of a Friday afternoon, instead of sitting in a cafe in Paris. I have to talk about the biggest obsession of my life, Aldridge Estate and Winery. I am Catherine Aldridge, 34 years old. I owner and operator of one of Napa Valley's most respected boutique vineyards. Behind my back, the staff calls me the Ice Queen. I have earned it. I don't smile much. I don't do small talk. I show up at dawn and leave after dark. I inspect every vine personally, taste every barrel, and approve every label. Some people think I am cold. I think I am careful. There is a difference. 2 weeks ago, I had scheduled a business trip to Paris. Meetings with French distributors, tours of Bordeaux's vineyards. The kind of networking that keeps a small operation like mine competitive. I had blocked out the calendar, briefed the staff, and packed my bags. Everything was arranged. Then the weather forecast changed. An unusual cold front was sweeping down from Canada, bringing with it the threat of an early frost that could annihilate my entire $1 million Merlot harvest. The grapes were at that delicate stage, ripe enough to pick, but not yet picked. One night of freezing temperatures would turn them to mush. I didn't hesitate. I canceled Paris at the last minute, rebooked my flight home, and drove straight from the airport to the North Vineyard, wearing the first work clothes I could grab from my mudroom. Heavy waterproof coveralls, rubber boots that came up to my knees, a wool cap pulled down over my ears. The ground was already cold, the mud thick and clinging. I had directed the crew as they rolled out the wind machines and set up the irrigation sprinklers for frost protection. My knees sank into the wet earth as I checked the soil temperature with my bare hands, calculating how many hours we had before the freeze hit. That is when I heard the engines. A convoy of black luxury limousines, polished to a mirror shine, was wending up the long driveway toward the main villa. The sight of them, moving in a stately procession, was completely wrong. The estate schedule was supposed to completely empty during my absence. I had closed the tasting room for deep cleaning. The event staff had the week off. There shouldn't be anyone here except the skeleton maintenance crew. I stood up, mud dripping from my coveralls, confusion turning quickly to alarm. I started walking toward the villa, my boots squelching with every step in the thick mud. As I got closer, I could hear music. Louder. The clink of glasses. A party. Someone was throwing a party in my house. I approached from the side, staying low behind the tall hedgerows that bordered the formal gardens. When I reached the stone terrace that overlooks the valley, I finally saw them. Maybe 40 guests, all dressed in cocktail attire, holding champagne flutes. Waiters in black vests circulated with silver trays. A string quartet played something classical and expensive-sounding near the fountain. And there, at the center of it all, was Bella. She was 27. 7 years younger than me, and we couldn't have been more different. Where I was practical and blunt, she was charming and manipulative. Where I worked 16-hour days to keep the vineyard profitable, she had spent the last decade bouncing between failed acting gigs and rich boyfriends. Our parents had always favored her, their beautiful, vivacious baby girl who could do no wrong. I hadn't spoken to Bella in 6 months. Now she was standing on my terrace, laughing with the handsome man, Preston Sterling, and his billion-dollar parents. Then the cork hit me. The tiny projectile from an expensive bottle struck my left shoulder. Everyone on the terrace turned to look at me. I was a sight-covered head, to toe in mud. Hair plastered to my skull, rubber boots caked in vineyard dirt. I looked like a creature that had crawled out of a swamp. "Don't worry about the gardener," Bella repeated, her voice dripping with false sympathy, loud enough for me to hear this time. "She's just a hired hand we keep around out of pity." Rage exploded in my chest, hot and immediate. I opened my mouth to scream. I too announced that I owned every square inch of this property, that she was trespassing, that this entire party was a fraud. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on Margaret Sterling's face, that aristocratic disdain, the certainty that I was beneath her notice. Or maybe it was the tiny smirk playing at the corner of Bella's mouth, daring me to make a scene. I realized if I confronted her now, in front of all these people, she would find some way to spin it. She would cry. She would claim it was a family misunderstanding. She would make me look like the villain. The cold-hearted Ice Queen ruining her sister's special day, so I did something Bella would never expect. I stayed silent. I let them think I was the hired help. I let them believe the lie. I turned away from the terrace and walked slowly around the side of the villa, heading for the staff entrance. Behind me, I heard the party resume, the music and laughter swelling again as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Bella had exploited my travel schedule to hijack my property. She had brought strangers into my home, served them my food and wine, and pretended to be someone she was not. And now I was going to make her pay. Moving away from the scene of the humiliation, my mind immediately went to the cold logic of revenge. I had allowed the spectacle to happen, the cork, the insult, the laughter, but only because an emotional outburst would have given Bella exactly what she wanted. A dramatic exit where she played the victim of the cruel, older sister. I would not give her that satisfaction. I slipped through the staff entrance, tracking thick, dark mud across the tile floor of the service hallway. Water dripped from my coveralls onto the floor. I did not care. The mess felt like a tangible representation of my life and priorities. The grit, the real work. Contrasting with the polished, fake world Bella was parading on my terrace. I was too angry to care about anything except getting answers and destroying her operation. I needed to get to my executive office. I needed to understand exactly how Bella had managed to pull this off, and who she had manipulated. The service hallway was the part of the villa that guests never saw, the working guts of the estate, all industrial carpet and white, painted walls. I had walked this corridor 1,000 times, but never like this, never as an intruder in my own home. My boots left clear, muddy prints on the light, colored carpet. The executive office was at the end of the hall, past the supply closets and the employee break room. I pushed open the door without knocking. Sarah looked up from the computer, her eyes going wide. "Miss Aldridge." Her voice came out as a squeak. "I thought you were in Paris." Sarah Miller was 24, fresh out of hospitality school, and had only been working at Aldridge Estate for 2 weeks. She was eager and competent, but inexperienced. She was precisely the kind of person who followed instructions without asking too many questions. The kind of person Bella could easily manipulate. I stood in the doorway, mud dripping onto the polished marble floor of the office, and fixed Sarah with a stare that could freeze wine in the bottle. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The raw presence of the Ice Queen, covered in filth and radiating silent fury, was enough. "Why is there a party at my mansion, Sarah?" She went pale, clasping her hands tightly together. I thought you approved it." "I got an email." "Show me." Her hands shook as she pulled up her inbox and turned the monitor toward me. There it was, sent 3 days ago, from an address that looked almost exactly like mine, Catherine.Aldridge@aldridgeestate.com. I squinted, my jaw tightening with focused concentration. My real address, the one I used for all business communications, was Catherine.Aldridge@aldridgewinery.com. This fraudulent one was missing the letter W in winery. A tiny difference, easily missed by someone who did not know better, especially an inexperienced, overworked employee. The email read, "Sarah, I approve lending the villa to Bella's family this weekend for free. Please coordinate with the catering staff and open the event spaces as needed. Do not disturb me while I am in Paris. I will not be checking email regularly. Catherine." I read it twice. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding. This wasn't Bella getting confused or overstepping boundaries. This was premeditated fraud, creating a fake email identity to misappropriate property and services. That was wire fraud, a federal crime. The kind of thing that carried a prison sentence if you were unlucky enough to get caught. Bella had calculated every step. She had known I would be out of the country. She had known Sarah was new and wouldn't question an email that looked official. She had set up a fake account, sent fraudulent authorization, and then waltzed into my home like she owned it. There was no room for the innocent mistake defense. Not anymore. This was a direct, criminal attack on my business and my life. "It's not your fault," I said, and was surprised to hear my voice come out calm, cold. That Ice Queen voice that made staff members straighten their spines and pay attention. "You did what you thought you were supposed to do." Sarah looked like she might cry. "I am so sorry, Miss Aldridge. I should have called to confirm. What's done is done." I moved to the desk, tracking mud across the expensive carpet, and picked up the clipboard that held the service request forms. "Show me everything they ordered." My gloves were off. The game had begun. The only thing that mattered now was proving the full extent of the crime. The moment I saw the line item for the wine cellar, the calculus changed from simple trespass to something far more unforgivable. Sarah handed over the catering papers with trembling hands. I scanned the list, and my blood pressure spiked with every line item. Kobe beef tenderloin, $3,200. White truffles, $1,800. Lobster tail, $2,400. A custom 7-tier cake from San Francisco, $1,500. Vintage champagne, cases of it, $8,000. Floral arrangements, $6,000. The string quartet, $4,500. Valet parking service, $2,000. The list went on, page after page, a monument to unearned, spectacular waste. I did a quick mental tally of the food and entertainment costs alone, tens of thousands of dollars. Vanished on a single afternoon of pretense. But there, at the bottom of the second page, was the item that made my hands clench into fists, making my muddy gloves stiffen. Special request: open vintage wine cellar. Guest selection permitted. The vintage cellar. The locked room in the basement where I kept my most valuable bottles. Wines from my grandfather's era. Rare vintages that I had been collecting and aging for years. Some of those bottles were worth $5,000 apiece. And Bella had given strangers permission to drink them. This was not just theft of inventory, this was the theft of history, of my legacy. Of the careful work of generations. I did the final math in my head, adding up the extravagant feast, the music, the flowers, and estimating the cost of the opened wine. The total bill for this afternoon of playing royalty was $85,400. $85,400 for an afternoon of pretending to be someone she was not. That figure felt immense and clean and undeniable. That number was my weapon. Sarah. I said quietly, the sound of my voice now perfectly level, the anger frozen solid. From this moment on, you only listen to me. Do you understand? She nodded frantically. Yes, Miss Aldridge. Stay in this office. Don't go outside. Don't talk to anyone. If Bella comes looking for you, you're in the restroom. Got it. Yes, Mom. I turned to leave, then spotted something on the edge of Sarah's desk. The wireless credit card terminal. A portable POS machine that we used for private tastings and events. Small black, about the size of a paperback book. I grabbed it and shoved it into the chest pocket of my coveralls. It was a heavy, cold weight against my chest. I'm going to need this, I said. Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't ask questions. Smart girl. She had seen enough. I left the office and headed deeper into the staff corridor. Toward the security wing in the basement. I was no longer sneaking. My boots squelched with every step. The sound loud and authoritative in the sterile hallway. The mud on my coveralls had started to dry in places, forming a stiff, uncomfortable crust against my skin. I did not care. I wanted to stay dirty. I wanted to look exactly like this when I confronted Bella, muddy, disheveled, a walking, breathing reminder of who actually worked to maintain this estate while she played dress up with stolen luxury. The security office was in the basement, accessible only through a keycard lock. I swiped my card and pushed open the heavy, metal-lined door. Frank Miller, our head of security, looked up from his monitors. He was in his 50s, built like a retired linebacker, with gray hair buzzed military short. He had worked for my family for 20 years. If anyone was going to have my back, it was Frank. Catherine. He stood up, his expression shifting from surprise to concern to professional readiness. What the hell is going on? I saw the cars, but Sarah said. Sarah got a fake email. I interrupted, stepping fully into the small room. The mud I tracked in was immediately conspicuous on the clean concrete floor. Bella's throwing a party. In my house. Without my permission. It's not just a party, Frank. It's premeditated wire fraud and criminal trespass. Frank's jaw tightened immediately. You want me to shut it down? Not yet. I moved to the monitor wall, where 12 screens showed different views of the estate. First, I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. I need to know who is drinking my $5,000 wine. I pulled up a chair, mud and all, and sat down to watch my sister's party unfold on camera. My strategy was clear. I needed to let her dig her hole deeper. I needed the evidence to be irrefutable, undeniable. I needed her to cross the line from intent into grand larceny. The line had been drawn, and the only path forward was destruction. I leaned forward, ready to wait. Sitting in the cramped security room, the flickering fluorescent lights and the hum of the monitors became the grim backdrop to my sister's perfect, stolen performance. The tech room was utilitarian concrete walls, humming equipment, and the faint, stale smell of electronics and old coffee. It was the physical opposite of the luxury happening upstairs. Down here, there was no champagne, no illusion of elegance. Just me, Frank. And the truth displayed on 12 security monitors. I didn't change clothes. The mud on my coveralls had dried completely now, forming a stiff, uncomfortable shell that pulled at my skin with every movement. It itched terribly. Bits of dried dirt foffed off whenever I shifted in my chair, settling on the concrete floor. But I didn't move. I wanted to feel this discomfort. I wanted it to fuel my rage, to remind me exactly why I was about to burn Bella's world to the ground. The physical pain grounded me in reality, a necessary anchor against the delusion being broadcast on the screens. Frank, I said, my eyes fixed on the monitors. Lock down all exits. No one in. No one out. He picked up his radio without hesitation. Copy that. I'll alert the gate staff. On the main screen, I watched the party unfold in real time. Bella was holding court in the grand ballroom now, surrounded by guests who hung on her every word. The tall man beside her, her fiancé, Preston Sterling, had his arm around her waist. He was handsome in that generic, privileged way, strong jaw, expensive haircut. The kind of casual confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. The older couple stood nearby Margaret Sterling, the silver-haired woman in pearls who had looked at me like I was dirt, and a man I assumed was Preston's father, equally polished and aristocratic. Frank adjusted the audio feed, and suddenly I could hear them clearly. Absolutely stunning property, Margaret was saying, her voice crisp and cultured. How long has it been in your family, Bella dear? Bella's laugh was musical practiced. Oh, generations. My great-grandfather built the main house in the 20s. The vineyard has been ours ever since. Lies. All of it lies. My great-grandfather built the house, yes? But the vineyard was mine, specifically mine, the result of 2 decades of blood, sweat, and legal maneuvering to keep it out of her grasping hands. And the management. Margaret continued. You mentioned a hired administrator. A Catherine. Yes. Bella's tone shifted, becoming dismissive and falsely indulgent. She's competent enough, I suppose. But she can be difficult. Very territorial about the day-to-day operations. My parents keep her on out of loyalty to her family. They've worked here for decades, but honestly, she's a bit grasping. My fingernails dug into the arms of the chair. The insult cut deeper than the champagne cork had. To be called grasping by a parasitic sister who was literally stealing $85,000 worth of services from me was a profound irony. Preston spoke up for the first time, his voice smooth and pleasant. Will that be a problem after the wedding? I thought you said we could use this place as a vacation home. Oh, it won't be a problem. Bella's smile was radiant on the monitor. I told you. Our grandparents left this estate to my parents. Catherine has just hired help. After the wedding, we can make whatever staffing changes we want. We could even convert part of the vineyard into a golf course if we wanted to. A golf course. Margaret clapped her hands. What a marvelous idea. I felt Frank tense beside me. Boss, he said quietly, his gaze locked on the screen. She just committed fraud on camera. We have her dead to rights. Want me to call the sheriff? I watched Bella on the screen, saw her throw her head back and laugh at something Preston said. She looked so happy, so confident. She genuinely believed she had gotten away with it. Not yet, I said. Frank frowned. Why not? Because right now, she can claim it was all a misunderstanding. A miscommunication between family members. Her parents would back her up, spinning it as a silly sister feud. I pointed at the monitor, where a waiter was approaching Bella with a question. But if she opens those wine bottles, if she drinks my property without permission, then it's not intent anymore. It's a completed crime. You want to let her finish the party? Frank asked, sounding horrified. I want irrefutable proof. I want grand larceny confirmed. She needs to cross the line where no lawyer can bail her out. I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the PWAS machine. I want her to rack up every penny of that $85,000 bill. I want her to stand in front of those Sterling family billions and play pretend until she can't take it back. Understanding dawned on Frank's face. And then you walk in. And then I walk in. He nodded slowly, the soldier accepting the grim order. All right, I'll keep the team on standby, but Catherine... He hesitated. What? She's your sister? She called me hired help? I said flatly, the mud on my skin feeling less like dirt and more like armor. She told strangers I was greedy and difficult. She tried to steal my life and turn my life's work into a golf course. She stopped being my sister the moment she sent that fake email. Frank didn't argue. He just nodded and picked up his phone. I'll have the sheriff's hotline ready. When you give the word, I can report grand larceny. Grand larceny. In California. That meant theft of property valued over $10,000. It was a felony, carrying years in prison valued over $10,000. It was a felony, carrying years in prison if convicted. The wine cellar alone would push the total past that threshold with just 2 bottles. We settled into silence, waiting for the clink of glasses that would mark the point of no return. The crystal clink of those glasses on the monitor was the sound of a closing door. Not a door leading to freedom, but one leading straight to a felony charge. We sat in that cramped tech room for nearly 3 hours. A vigil of pure anger and cold patience. I didn't move from the chair, didn't shower, didn't eat. I just sat there, covered in drying mud, watching the party unfold on 12 different screens. Frank brought me water at one point, and I drank it without tasting it. My entire focus on cataloging every crime, every transgression, every moment of Bella's lavish delusion. I watched as a waiter approached the central table, with a dark glass bottle, its label old and delicate. Even from the grainy security footage, I recognized it immediately. Vintage 1990. 8 Cabernet. One of my grandfather's bottles. It was one of the rarest, worth $5,000, and the one I had planned to save for the winery's 100th anniversary. Bella nodded enthusiastically. The waiter opened it, poured 5 generous glasses, and distributed them to Bella, Preston, and his parents. They raised their glasses, toasted, and drank. The act was quick, effortless, and utterly destructive. I felt something cold and hard settle permanently in my chest. It wasn't quite satisfaction, but certainty. The line had been crossed. The crime was completed. Now we wait, I said. As the afternoon light began to fade around 4:30, they opened a second bottle from the vintage cellar. Another $5,000 in stolen property, gone. 45 minutes later, the caterers brought out the Kobe beef, perfectly seared, plated on china I had inherited from my grandmother. Margaret Sterling declared it divine. Around 6:45, Margaret Sterling pulled Bella aside for a private conversation in the study, which thankfully had a camera and audio feed. I switched the monitor to that room. Very impressed with the property, Margaret was saying, her voice low but clear. Preston has always wanted a wine country retreat. If you're serious about making this available after the wedding, I'd like to discuss terms. Terms? Bella's voice was careful, a predator sensing a meal. Trying not to look too eager. A financial arrangement. We'd purchase a stake in the property, of course. Become partners with your family. I'm thinking something in the neighborhood of $3 million. $3 million. For a share of property Bella didn't own. Property she planned to help steal. I felt Frank look at me sharply, but I kept my eyes on the screen. This was no longer just about paying a bill. This was setting up a colossal con, leveraging my property and my name to broker a fake real estate deal with a billionaire family. This was Bella's deepest game. That's very generous, Bella said slowly, playing the part of the sophisticated property owner. Think about it. Margaret patted her hand. Talk to your parents. We can have our lawyers draw something up next week. Bella smiled. I'll definitely discuss it with them. They left the study. I switched back to the main ballroom feed. She's going to sell your property to them, Frank said, his voice tense. That's her game. Use the engagement to gain their trust, then broker a fake real estate deal. We should stop this now, before it goes any further. Not yet. I stood up. Dried mud raining off my coveralls, making a small, gritty pile on the floor. He slammed his hand on the desk. Catherine, this isn't just about the party anymore. She's setting up a con that could land her in federal prison. Good. She's your sister. I finally looked at him. She stopped being my sister when she decided I was disposable. When she looked at everything I've built and thought, she could just take it and turn it into a golf course. I gave her chances, Frank. I loaned her money. I offered her a job here, real work, with real pay. She turned it down because it wasn't glamorous enough. She wanted the rewards without the effort. And now she's trying to steal them. So you're going to let her commit fraud on camera. I'm going to let her commit every crime she is capable of committing. And then I'm going to make sure she faces every consequence she deserves. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. Your call. Boss. On the monitor, the party reached its final peak. Guests clustered around as the massive cake was wheeled out, 7 tiers of white fondant and gold leaf. Bella and Preston stood together, holding the knife, smiling for a photographer. I hadn't even noticed until now. They cut the first slice together, fed each other bites, and kissed while everyone applauded. The clock on the wall struck 7. 4 hours since the champagne cork had hit my shoulder. 4 hours of watching my sister play pretend in my house with my things. I reached into my pocket and felt the portable POS machine. The weight of it was reassuring. Solid. Real, it's time, I said. Frank stood up. You want the security team? Gather them, I said. But let me enter first. I want them to see me alone. Understood. I walked to the door, then paused. Frank? Have that sheriff's hotline ready. If she doesn't cooperate, I'm pressing charges immediately. Will do. I left the tech room and walked back through the staff corridor, retracing my muddy steps. But this time, I wasn't hiding. This time, I was walking toward the main ballroom with purpose. The POS machine sat heavy in my pocket. Bella had built herself a trap out of champagne glasses and lies. And now she was standing in the middle of it, smiling for cameras, dreaming of millions. I was about to spring it. I wasn't walking into my dining room. I was walking onto a stage. And the mud on my coveralls was my costume. I reached the service door that led to the main ballroom, put my hand on the handle, took one deep breath of the sterile air. Conditioned service corridor air. And then I pushed the door open and stepped into the light. The main doors to the dining room didn't just open, they were thrown wide. I didn't wait for an announcement. I walked straight in. My rubber boots landed with a heavy, wet thud against the polished marble floor, leaving muddy footprints with each step. My coveralls were caked with dried earth that flaked off as I moved, creating a trail of dirt across the pristine white runner that had been laid down for the event. My hair, which I'd deliberately left wild and tangled beneath my cap, hung in matted clumps around my face. I could feel dried mud cracking on my cheeks when I set my jaw. The contrast was perfect. Around me, a sea of silk and satin, champagne flutes and pearl necklaces, $1,000 updos and designer heels. The air smelled of expensive perfume and catered hors d'oeuvres. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in a warm, golden glow. And there I stood, the swamp monster at the ball. Every eye in that room locked onto me. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. In the corner, a guest gasped audibly, hand flying to their mouth. The silence was absolute, a profound physical vacuum created by my presence. I didn't look at any of them. My eyes found Margaret Sterling's table in the back corner. The power position, naturally, where Bella was seated next to Preston. Still glowing from the applause of the cake cutting, I walked straight toward them. Each footstep echoed in the sudden silence. Thud. Crunch. Crunch. I relished the sound of the mud and gravel beneath my heavy boots, the sound of reality intruding on their fantasy. Bella saw me first. She stood so fast her chair scraped backward across the marble. You're supposed to be in. I reached past Preston's shoulder. Past his untouched plate of herb, crusted salmon, and wrapped my muddy fingers around the neck of the wine bottle sitting in the center of their table. The vintage 1990, 8 Cabernet Sauvignon. I held it up to the light, examining the label with exaggerated care. The bottle was already open. Breathing in a crystal decanter that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. About a third of it had been poured out into the glasses around the table, confirming the crime. Frank, I said, my voice cutting cleanly and coldly across the silent room. Behind me, the main doors opened again. A different set of doors from the service entrance. Frank stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed security officers. They didn't draw weapons, but they stood with a military precision that sucked the last of the oxygen out of the room. I don't recall signing a release order for this 1990 8 vintage, I said, not taking my eyes off the bottle. Frank pulled out a tablet from his jacket and made a show of scrolling through it, his face professionally neutral. No release order exists, Miss Aldridge. I've checked the inventory logs twice. The seller was accessed under fraudulent pretenses. I turned the bottle slowly, letting everyone get a good look at the rare vintage. Because this particular vintage, market value is $5,000 per bottle. I heard the whispers start then, a ripple of shock moving through the crowd. A 5,000. She's joking. Did she say per bottle? I set the bottle down with a deliberate clunk and turned my full attention to Bella. My little sister had gone absolutely white. Even her lips had lost their color, making her carefully applied lipstick look garish against her pale skin. Receiving stolen property valued over $10,000. I said conversationally, speaking loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Is grand larceny in the state of California. And considering you've already consumed about $1,700 worth of this particular bottle, and I can see at least 2 more empties on that side table, that's grand larceny confirmed. We're well past that threshold. Preston started to stand. Now wait. Just, sit down. Margaret Sterling said quietly, her cultured voice snapping like a whip. He sat immediately. I pulled the wireless POS machine from my coverall pocket. A clump of dried mud fell off it and landed directly on the white tablecloth. An obscene brown stain against the pristine linen. Here's how this works, Bella, I said, my voice retaining that deadly calm. You're going to pay the $85,400 you charged to this estate's accounts right now. Or you're going to leave here in a Napa County sheriff's cruiser. I don't. This is insane. Bella's voice pitched higher. This is my engagement party. You can't just. Wire fraud. I held up one muddy finger. That fake email you sent pretending to be me. That's wire fraud. Federal offense. I held up a second finger. Criminal trespass. You're not authorized to be on this property. A third finger joined the others. Grand larceny. We just covered that one. I smiled. And I knew it wasn't pretty. It was cold and sharp, a predator's expression. Want me to call in the sheriff? He's on standby. 5 minutes out. I can have you in handcuffs before dessert is served. You're bluffing. Bella's hand trembled as she reached for her purse. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the ice melting in someone's water glass 3 tables away. She knew I wasn't bluffing. She had played the game of manipulation her entire life, but she had never played against someone who knew the legal stakes as well as the emotional ones. She pulled out her card with shaking fingers. A premium card, the kind with no preset spending limit. The kind she had probably talked some bank manager into giving her based on her impending marriage to wealth. I held out the POS machine. She swiped. The moment Bella's card registered, transaction declined. The air went out of her lungs, but it was Margaret Sterling who stood up. We all waited, suspended in that silent room. The machine beeped once, twice. Then it displayed in bright red letters, transaction declined. Oh, that was sweet, I murmured. Low enough that only the people at the table could hear, but the effect was devastating. That's not possible, Bella whispered. She grabbed the card back, stared at it like it had personally betrayed her. Try it again. I didn't move. The machine works fine. Turns out $85,400 is slightly above your credit limit. Funny how that works. Bella's breathing had gone shallow and rapid. She was in panic attack territory. I don't have another card. Mom. She turned desperately to our mother, who was sitting 2 tables away, looking like she wanted to sink through the floor. Mom. Your card. I need. My mother made no move. She was trapped, caught between saving her favored child and public bankruptcy. She can't pay. Preston finally found his voice, attempting a weak, protective move. Can't you see she doesn't have it? We'll figure something out. We'll arrange a payment plan or... A payment plan. I let the words hang in the air. For stolen goods. That's not how this works, Preston. A chair scraped. Margaret Sterling stood. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, sensing the shift in the atmosphere from a sister feud to a conflict between titans. Margaret was the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying 70 years of inherited wealth and social power radiating from her like heat from asphalt. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon. Her navy dress probably cost more than my truck. Diamond earrings caught the light when she moved. She looked at me, really, looked at me. I was covered in mud. My hair was a disaster. I was wearing rubber boots to her grandson's engagement party. By every social measure, I should have been beneath her notice, something to be removed by staff, an embarrassment to be dealt with quietly. But Margaret Sterling didn't look embarrassed. She looked assessing. Her eyes traveled from my muddy boots to my stained coveralls, to my tangled hair, and then back to my face. And in that moment, I saw something shift in her expression. It was subtle, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a tiny quirk at the corner of her mouth. Recognition. Not of me, exactly. Recognition of what I was. A predator looking at another predator. A woman who understood power, looking at another woman who had just demonstrated it. She despised Bella. I could see that clearly now, the gold digging, the manipulation, the transparent greed. But me? The woman who had crashed her future daughter. In-law's engagement party looking like a swamp creature, who had backed her into a corner with cold precision, who had chosen public humiliation as a weapon. Me, she respected. Margaret reached into her clutch and pulled out a card. Not just any card. A black Centurion card. American Express's invitation, only monster, the one with no spending limit at all. She placed it on the table with a soft click. Swipe it, she said. $85,400. Oh my God. Bella's face lit up with desperate, blinding relief. Oh, thank you. I knew you'd understand. Shut up. The 2 words were delivered with such cold precision that Bella's mouth snapped closed mid-syllable. Margaret didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on me. I'm not paying for her. I'm paying to buy silence. There's a difference. Do we understand each other? Miss Aldridge. I picked up the card, the thick, heavy metal cool against my muddy fingers. I swiped it through the machine. The approval came through in less than 2 seconds. Transaction approved. $85,400. I held out the receipt. Margaret took it, folded it precisely in half, and tucked it into her clutch. The debt was paid. I didn't need my sister in handcuffs and a mugshot. I just needed her, broken. And Margaret had just delivered a far more exquisite form of destruction. I looked at Frank and gave a single, slight shake of my head. His hand moved away from his radio. The police sitting in their cruiser 5 minutes away would stay put. Margaret turned to face Bella for the first time. My lawyer will arrive tomorrow morning at 9. You will sign every document she places in front of you. You will not argue. You will not negotiate. You will not call your mother or your sister or anyone else for advice. Do you understand? Bella nodded mutely, tears starting to track through her makeup. I asked you a question. Yes. Bella's voice cracked. Yes. I understand. Good. Margaret straightened her already perfect posture. The wedding will proceed as planned. The Sterling name will not be associated with theft or scandal. You will smile. You will be gracious. You will be the perfect daughter-in-law. Her smile was razor-sharp. And you will remember, every single day, exactly how much you cost me. Every text message, every purchase, every decision you make, I will know about it. Consider yourself managed. Bella was trembling, her future mother-in-law having bought her like property. I had achieved my goal. My decision to stay and enforce consequences had paid off, delivering a punishment far more lasting than a jail sentence. I didn't need Bella in handcuffs. I just needed her, broken. And when I looked at my parents, I knew the night's work was not yet finished. Margaret turned back to me and extended her hand. I looked down at my muddy palm, then back at her. I don't shake hands when I'm this filthy, I said. Smart woman. Margaret almost smiled. My son is an idiot, but my lawyer is exceptional. Your wine will be compensated at full market value for today's borrowing. You'll have a check by Monday. That's not necessary. It's not about necessity, it's about doing business properly. She glanced around the room, at all the frozen, staring faces. I suggest everyone return to their dinners. The evening's entertainment has concluded. Like someone had flipped a switch, the room came back to life. Conversations resumed, louder than before, buzzing with gossip. The string quartet started playing again. Forks clinked against plates. I looked at Bella one last time. She had sunk into her chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Preston sat next to her, useless as ever, patting her back with all the effectiveness of a wet paper towel. I scanned the room for my parents. They were standing near the buffet table, frozen. My mother's face was red with fury. My father looked pale, defeat etched onto his features. They saw me looking and started to move toward me. My mother's mouth already opening to launch into some lecture about family and forgiveness, and how could I do this to my own sister? Frank, I said quietly. Escort Mr. and Mrs. Aldridge off the property. They're no longer welcome at the estate. You can't. My mother started as she got within earshot, her voice strained. I can. I did. Goodbye. Frank moved between us like a wall. 2 of his security team materialized beside him. My parents had the good sense not to argue. Not here. Not now. Not in front of Margaret Sterling and half of Napa Valley's social elite. They were escorted out, the door closing behind them with a final, echoing click. I turned and walked back toward the service door, my muddy boots making that heavy, satisfying thud with every step. Behind me I heard Margaret's voice, clear and carrying. Someone get this girl a proper glass of wine, not the stolen vintage. something appropriate. I smiled as I pushed through the doors into the cool night air. The mud on my clothes wasn't dirt. It was a medal of honor, and I had just won the war. 6 months later, I am standing in the middle of the North Vineyard, and the world is heavy with fruit. The Merlot grapes hang in thick clusters from the vines, their dark purple skin nearly black in the late afternoon sun. I reach out and cup one cluster in my palm. Feeling the weight of it, the firmness. Perfect. Another week and we'll start the harvest. Thanks to my decision to come back early that Friday. To prioritize the vines over a fake Paris trip, we saved the entire crop. The irrigation system that needed emergency adjustment, the pest situation that required immediate intervention, the weather pattern that would have been catastrophic if left unmanaged for another 3 days. All handled, all saved. The financial damage from that decision. About $800 in lost deposits for the Paris hotel, and a few hundred more for the cancel first class ticket. The financial gain. This harvest alone will generate close to $500,000 in revenue once bottled and distributed. I'm pretty good at math. That's a favorable exchange rate. A breeze moves through the vineyard, rustling the leaves, carrying the sweet, sharp smell of ripening grapes. My boots are clean this time. Practical work boots instead of the rubber monstrosities from that night, crunching on the gravel path between rows. The sun is warm on my shoulders. The sky is that particular shade of California blue that makes you understand why people pay millions for property here. My phone buzzes. I pull it out and see a text from Frank. Sterling wedding photos hit the social media today. Thought you might want to know. I don't need to look at them. I already know exactly what they show. The wedding went ahead as planned, of course, after the engagement party disaster, with all the pomp and circumstance Margaret Sterling could arrange. Bella got her fairy tale venue, her designer dress, her 5-tier cake, her string quartet and rose petals, and everything she had ever dreamed of. She also got her prison sentence. Because Bella is now Mrs. Preston Sterling. Living in the Sterling family compound, and she might as well be wearing an ankle monitor. Margaret's lawyer, who is indeed exceptional, had drawn up an airtight post-nuptial agreement that essentially made Bella a very well-dressed employee. Every purchase over $500 requires pre-approval. Every text message, every phone call, every lunch with friends, monitored and managed. She has a clothing allowance, a personal spending account with strict limits, and absolutely zero financial autonomy. She got exactly what she wanted: wealth, status, the Sterling name. She just had to trade her freedom for it. My mother calls me cruel for allowing it. She sent me 17 text messages in the past month alone, each one a variation on the same theme. How can you let Margaret treat your sister like this? How can you stand by and watch Bella suffer? I delete them all without responding. Because here's what my mother doesn't understand, what she has never understood. I didn't do anything to Bella. Bella made her choices. She chose to steal. She chose to lie. She chose to commit wire fraud and trespass and grand larceny. She chose to try to manipulate and con her way into wealth. All I did was refuse to be her victim. All I did was enforce consequences. Margaret and I have an understanding now. We're not friends. But we respect each other. We recognize each other. Two women who understand that power isn't given, it's taken. And that sometimes the cruelest kindness is letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. My parents, on the other hand, are permanently banned from the Aldridge estate. They haven't contested it. After the engagement party, after being escorted off the property by security, they seemed to finally understand that their enabling days were over. No more family dinners where I am expected to just forgive and forget and pretend everything is fine. I walk to the end of the vineyard row and look back toward the main villa. The sun is starting to sink lower, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It's mine. Fully. Completely. Without question. I select a bottle from the reserve collection, something complex and rich with notes of blackberry and oak. I take it outside to the terrace, where I can watch the sun finish setting over my vines. The mud on my body that night wasn't humiliation. It was armor. It was proof that I had prioritized what mattered. The vines, the harvest, the real work, over appearances and social performance. When I walked into that dining room, looking like a swamp monster, I wasn't the one who should have been embarrassed. They were. Bella and Preston, and all those people in their designer clothes, drinking stolen wine, celebrating fraud. They were the embarrassment. I sipped my wine and watched the stars start to appear in the darkening sky. Worth it? That's the question my mother keeps asking. Was it worth destroying your relationship with your sister? Worth tearing the family apart? Here's my answer: look at my vineyard. Look at my harvest. Look at my business thriving and growing and succeeding. Look at me standing here, debt-free, parasite-free. Yeah, it was worth it.